Hello, my name's Julian Edgar and I'm the author of this book, Designing and Building a New Energy Efficient Home. So you want an energy efficient house and you want it on a budget? Here's how to do it. There are 4 key points and here they are. Number 1, get an expert involved from the very beginning of the process. Number 2, pick the right block, pick the right site to build the house. Number 3, always start from an optimal, ideal configuration and then modify the project from there. And number 4, use only readily available materials and trades. Taking any other approach and costs can go up by hundreds of thousands of dollars in the blink of an eye. Let's explore each of those things. Each is absolutely critical. So the first one is you must get an expert involved from the very beginning of the project. The very beginning, even before you start laying out too many ideas, get an expert involved. Now, you might say, well, gee, that's going to be really expensive, isn't it? And it can be. I've seen architects charging what I think are just ludicrous amounts of money for what's really quite straightforward, but it doesn't actually have to be like that. So in Australia, we have the NATA's energy modelling capability. We have that software, which is absolutely world-class software. And we have dozens, hundreds, thousands of people who can use that software to model the energy results of a house. So you can give them a sketch, you can give them window sizes and locations, say what the walls are made of, say what the floor's made of, and they can run the model and tell you how energy efficient the house is going to be. So you get feedback right from the very beginning of the process. If you want a bit more guidance, you can go to an architect. What we did to keep costs under control is we talked to different architects and we said, we'd like you to give us feedback and we'd like to pay you an hourly rate. And the hourly rate was typically about $300 an hour. But because they only took 2 or 3 hours to actually look at the design and give feedback, the costs were really quite manageable. Compare that to, say, going to an architect for a package. We will design your house, we will lodge the application, $15, $20, $30, $40, $50, $100,000, just like that. And we're comparing that to, say, $300 an hour. It's a dramatically different rate. If you don't get an expert involved at the very beginning of the process, you will be trying to fix up the energy rating, trying to fix up the energy efficiency at the end of the planning process, and that's a really terrible way of doing it. You will not get good results, and you absolutely won't get good results on a budget. You must have an expert involved from the very beginning of the process, from the very beginning of those sketches. Here's how we're going to lay out our house. An expert needs to be involved from that point. Number 2, pick the right block. Now, if you've already picked out your house block where you want to build your house, then that's already fixed. But if you haven't, picking the right block is a really important aspect of getting an energy efficient house on a budget, because you want to pick land that allows you to have a house with plenty of northern windows. This is in southern Australia, or climates anywhere like it around the world. So the front of the house doesn't actually have to face north. People always think, well, the way the house faces is where the front door is, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the orientation of the house that allows lots of windows on the northern face of the house. That's in the southern hemisphere. Now, the really odd thing, or one of the really odd things about buying land in Australia, is that blocks that allow plenty of northern exposure aren't any more expensive than any other blocks, because people don't realise how advantageous it is to get a block of the right shape with the right aspect. People just ignore that. Costs are much the same. That gives you an enormous advantage. You can look at a block of land and say, yep, we can organise a house on this block, and we can organise it so it has plenty of northern windows, which is what we want for energy efficiency. So the first aspect, get an expert involved from the beginning. The second aspect, pick the right land. Now, the third aspect is always start from an optimal configuration and modify from there. So when you're designing the house, laying out the house, or even picking a house that's available from a volume builder, you need to look at the absolutely key ingredients first for an optimal energy efficient passive solar home. And they are orientation, where do those northern windows face, or how many windows can we get on the north? Shading, for example, if the block is heavily shaded, then that won't be any good. So what's the optimal shading we can get? What's the optimal thermal mass, which will typically be a concrete slab floor? What about ventilation? Can we organise this house so that we get plenty of ventilation on summer nights? And internal layout. Can we organise this house so the living areas are primarily on the north? What insulation do we need to achieve the very best efficiency? And what types of windows do we need to achieve the very best efficiency? So we end up with a house, just a roughly planned house that's optimal in all these aspects. And then you start pulling back from there. You say, oh, well, we actually have a bit of a southern view, so we'd like some more windows on the south than we otherwise would have. Insulation, well, we can't really afford to go for thicker than normal walls, 140mm studs. We really need to go back to 90mm, and that'll pull the insulation back. Windows, yeah, well, those triple glazed windows are nice, but we can't afford those. And so you pull back. So you don't end up with a house that's optimal in every respect, but because you've started with that at the beginning of the process, you'll find the end result is far more optimal than it would have been if you'd started at the other end. If you'd started, here's what we want in our house, now how can we make it more energy efficient? You'll always be behind the 8 ball comparing that to, here is the most energy efficient house that we can create that matches our needs. Now let's pull back a bit from that optimal level. It's quite a different philosophy in terms of organising and building a house. But if you start off with the very best from an energy perspective and pull back from there, you'll still end up with a very, very good house. When we were building our house, or when we were designing our house, my wife Georgina would sometimes say to me, oh, are we allowed to have that? And what she meant is, if we're still going to have a really energy efficient house, are we allowed to change that room or change those windows or change those doors or change that insulation or whatever? So we were both very conscious that making changes might be pulling back the energy efficiency. How can we juggle those changes so the impact on energy efficiency is minimal? And I'll give you an actual example. In our house, from the kitchen, Georgina wanted a view out over the sink towards a dam. We're on a rural property. And I said, oh, it's a southern window. We really want to keep southern windows small in area because you lose a lot of heat. You never gain any sunshine that's useful in winter. What can we do to pull back the size of these windows? And so we worked it out that her view was perfectly serviced if we had windows between the kitchen counter, the countertop, and less than the height of the cupboards above. So we have windows about that height. With her height, she gets the perfect view she wanted, but the actual area of the windows is quite small. Small for energy efficiency, great for the view she wanted. And that's an example where you start with optimal and then you pull back from that point. The fourth point is use only readily available materials and trades. And this is absolutely critical. People will tell you that you need all this stuff you don't need. Oh, you need specially wide walls for special insulation. You need special windows from Europe. You need a special mechanical ventilator. You need special sealing membranes. And of course, you're going to need special trades to install all these things. What that actually achieves is a massive expenditure of money very quickly. Windows are expensive, good quality windows are expensive, very good quality windows are extremely expensive. I'm not saying they're not better, they are better, but the cost just absolutely balloons. And what you've got to do is you've got to say, all right, as soon as we go for those special materials, the cost is going to be 50% more, 100% more, 150% more. Therefore, what we need to do is we need to say, if we want to keep our costs under control, we need to say, we are going to build the house only from readily available materials. And when I say readily available materials, I mean materials that you can buy from your local good quality window supplier, your local buildings company, building supply company, and so on. As soon as you step away from the norm, your costs are going to go up very, very considerably. So it comes back to design. What design of house can we create with that expert input, remember, that uses normal materials and yet is still really energy efficient? And if you follow that process, then you're going to achieve an energy efficient home that's much, much cheaper than people tell you you need to spend. So normal trades are all that are required. Your local qualified plumber, your local qualified carpenter, and so on. But I think inspection, professional inspection at every stage of the build is an absolute must. It doesn't matter if it's a commercial or residential builder doing the house. It doesn't matter if you're an owner builder. You need an expert to come in quite frequently and have a really detailed look at what's been going on and how well it's been done. Now, I was in communication with someone the other day and they said, some builders, you've got to make an appointment before you can go on site to see what's happening. I would suggest that if you are dealing with a residential or commercial builder, you make it absolutely clear from the very beginning that you are going to be employing an expert independent inspector, not their inspector, not the building company's inspector, your own inspector who's going to look at the progress of the work at each step. Okay, make that really, really clear. Now, the reason I say inspection is a must is not because I think all the trades are rubbish, but I do think some trades have fallen into bad habits. Installation of insulation with gaps, for example. Gaps are just terrible in insulation. There can be no gaps at all. When we were building our house, we had a little interesting episode with the tiler who, our certifier, who was our inspector, had suggested a certain type of waste exit had to be used in the bathrooms, what's called a puddle flange. The tiler hadn't heard of that, but the inspector was insistent, this is the way it has to be done, and this is the way it was done. And the inspector, if you pay per inspection, look, even if it's $2,000 an inspection and you have 10 inspections, you're still way, way ahead in terms of the likely quality of the house that's being created. So normal trades are all that are required, but you do have to have rigorous and frequent inspections of the progress, whether you're doing it yourself, whether you're employing subcontractors as an owner builder, or whether a professional company is doing it. So here's our home, a nice simple home, largely a rectangle. Doesn't mean you have to build a rectangle, although it does have huge advantages in terms of energy efficiency and cost. This home was no more expensive than any normal volume built house. Not an architectural special house, no more expensive than any normal volume built house. Why? Because the architectural fees were so low for reasons I've already described, and because it uses completely conventional materials and trades all the way through. It gets its extremely good energy efficiency because of the design approach, especially starting with everything optimal for energy efficiency and then pulling back from that point to achieve a home that satisfied everyone's requirements. So starting from that position, pulling back from that position, you still end up with a very, very good home. The book's called Designing and Building a New Energy Efficient Home, has our home on the cover. It'll be out mid-2026 or perhaps a bit mid-late 2026. I'm waiting until then, until I have full logging data for every season of the year for this home. Everything is being logged, temperature, radiant temperature, relative humidity, dew point, you name it, it's being logged. So we have really strong data showing the performance of the house over the course of a full 12-month year. But the key point of this video is it's a highly energy efficient energy efficient home that costs no more than a standard volume built house. It is absolutely possible if you follow the 4 points in this video. Thank you.